Good morning to this very, very intimate and casual podcast for the International Women's Day. International Women's Day is celebrated on 8th of March every year, and the purpose of celebrating this day especially is to take stock where we are, how far have we reached to achieve gender equality, women empowerment. And today I have with me some very, very important people from the private sector and the development sector. My very own boss, Lansana Wonneh, he has recently joined UN Women Pakistan office as representative AI, and with him is Sarwat Salahuddin. Sarwat Salahuddin is the Chief Ethics and Diversity Officer at JAS, and with her is sitting the Head of Cooperation EU, Jeroen Willems. And then last but not the least, we have Alia, Zafar, Group Head of People and Organizational Excellence, Bank of Punjab. Welcome to this breakfast roundtable chit-chat, is what we would like to call it. The significance of International Women's Day is not lost on any of us, but let's try and understand, and I'll start with you, Alia. What is empowerment to you? We know what empowerment is, and we try to struggle with the words, we strategize for it. But if I ask you personally, what does it mean to you?
Thank you so much, and such an important question. At times you think about what exactly do we mean by empowerment. It can mean different things for different people. But when we look at genders, I think the first and foremost thing from my perspective is the right to take decisions. When any person has that right to take decisions, the decisions of life that they need to take for themselves, that in itself creates that space for empowerment. So that's the baseline, I think, that we need to work towards. And when we look around us, within our society, within our organizations, that the lack of it is what essentially we are trying to fix all the time. So that's how I see it.
I think that's a very important aspect of it. Would you agree with her?
I absolutely agree, and I think that basically working on women empowerment is in my own interest. I'm a father of three, two girls and one boy, and I hope that my girls do as good as my boy does. But women empowerment really goes at the heart also of what the EU is trying to do across the world. And I've been very much inspired. I was previously posted in a country not so far from here, Azerbaijan. And I was working with someone from a civil society organization who was really very inspiring, having women empowerment very at the heart of what she was doing. And she brought me to a very traditional village very close to Iran, and in a way resembling a little bit some things that you could see in Pakistan. Not so many women on the streets, very low participation of women in the workforce, and in that particular place, village, small town, she insisted and she convinced us to put some money into that, to put a women resource center there, a place for people, for women together, but also get some coaching, some legal advice, and some money for startups. And we came a few years later to that same village. It had transcended beyond recognition. A lot of new female entrepreneurs showing their husbands how much they can be making a difference in the day-to-day life of that village. That village has changed. If we can change that village in Azerbaijan, I'm very optimistic and inspired to do the same across the globe.
Sarwat, the question to you would be, one, do you agree with this, or do you have your own take on the word empowerment? But more importantly, you work for JAS. Do you see that spirit in our women? Because there is a limit to what others can do. Do you see that willpower? Because you come across girls who are, against all odds, joining the private sector and working?
Yeah, so thank you. Actually, I think empowerment to me means creating an enabling environment. So do we have the resources? Do we give the resources? Do we offer it to the larger audience? So as Jazz, I think it really ties in with the purpose of the organization as well, where we say that we want to empower and improve the lives and livelihoods of women and people through technology. Yeah. So, it very much ties in on how we promote empowerment, how we create that enabling environment, whether it's digital inclusion, whether it's financial inclusion. And talking of, so I've been with Jazz now for 14 years. And when I started off, and I am a lawyer by profession, so at that time, I was the only female manager in the department. And now the ratio of women within Jazz stands at 32%. So, those are the strides that we've made.
Brilliant. Okay, so Lansana, I'll just ask you all over again. What is empowerment to you? Because for UN Women, it's supposed to be leading this gender equality and women empowerment movement. It's very important for us to understand how do you look at this word and what are your concept of it?
Thank you very much. First, let me agree with what the colleagues have said around what empowerment is. However, I want to make some additions, from where I sit and where I work. As a basic definition, in my view, empowerment is about creating opportunities for individuals to be able to participate fully in their society, in the development of their society, but also benefit from those processes equitably and equally. With respect to the empowerment of women, we are very specific about empowerment of women because historically, women have been marginalized in so many spaces in favor of men. Girls have been marginalized in favor of boys. In many conservative societies, for instance, girls may not have had the opportunity to go to school, and they grow up becoming women who are not as educated as men. We also know that in many of those similar conservative societies, including Pakistan, women are not given significant opportunity, the enabling space to participate in governance and decision-making. And yet we have examples around the world, but also in Pakistan, of women who have made their mark in terms of leadership. I've been here for 12 days, but I've followed the history of Pakistan. There was a prime minister in this country, a female prime minister, that had a very creative agenda for the country. But of course, negative masculinity could not help her to survive. Beyond that, even in the homes, I think empowerment means that the woman is able to make a decision that influences the well-being of herself, her children, but also the husband, in the same way as the husband does. And this is important for so many reasons. One compelling reason about empowerment of women is it's about right. If God created all of us in his image, then we have rights, and those rights should not be subdued. 2, it is about smart economics. When you empower women in the economic space, it means you have empowered the household, you have empowered the community, you have empowered the society and the government, the economy of Pakistan in this case. But beyond that, if you have 2 teams, then you have a football match that can be won. But if you have only one part of your team that is playing, you are not likely to win anything. The world, God made this world of male and female, women and men, boys and girls. And therefore, we should equally be empowered and be in the space to create development. So those are what I think.
Another side of it, because traditionally, and Jeroen, I'll start with you this time. Traditionally, in societies like Pakistan society, people very conveniently believe that both genders have specific roles. And if we try to merge the lines, and for example, if we try to encourage more women to enter the workforce or leave the house to do something, the whole fabric of the society will collapse. And that is why we need to maintain the gender-specific roles as they are. What do you say to that? And if you disagree, why?
Listen, I don't know who invented gender-specific roles. I do know what statistics say. There was a very nice research done by the IMF not so long ago, actually, looking at the total population in developing and developed countries, and of that 72% of the male population is in the workforce, and only 36% of the female population is in the workforce. So that's a massive gap between men and women being part of the workforce. They have calculated, not us, they have calculated that with each percent that we close this gap, 1.5% of GDP is being accumulated. So we're not doing this, let's say, because it is nice for women. It's nice for all of us that everyone is participating actively in the economy, and it's not only bringing economic benefits. That's not the IMF, that's our own research showing that actually it strengthens security. It also ensures that societies are more equitable. And if you have everyone involved in decision making, not just half of the population, but everyone, it creates the right type of decisions that everybody feels better with. So I don't think I agree with a traditional role. Who decided this is traditional? Let's just look at facts.
Great. The marriage is another very interesting turning point in women in Pakistan. At one point, we're saying invest in women, bring them forward. Is it really in direct clash with the marriage? And because we have very definite age limit where we say that the girl must get married now. And unfortunately, that is the prime time when she can make her career. So I'll first throw it to you, Alia.
Sure. That's such a pain, I would say. Okay, so the reality is that yes, it does clash, and it clashes in the most horrific time for you when you're growing, and when you look at equity, and we see a lot of women getting out of the workforce for 6 to 7 years. What happens during that period is that their colleagues would obviously, who are not childbearing, of course, being male, and not doing the parenting role, being males in Pakistani society, would continue working. So the equity issue comes in here. When you get back into organizations, a lot of organizations do not give you the same space that you require to get back, get the right type of trainings, skills that you have missed in the last 5 to 6 to 7 years, and really, streamline yourself and align yourself with the world around you. So it's a definite challenge. Now, the second option is you do both things at the same time, which a lot of us have done. It puts tremendous pressure on the women. The society hasn't evolved to the extent where the parenting role and the caregiving role would be taken up by men equally. And because of that, there's a lot more pressure on women. So how to resolve this? Essentially, I think when we get into anything, whether it's education, whether it's marriage, because it's a big commitment, or a career, that's a big commitment as well. You need to be very clear yourself why you're going into that. And you need to make those decisions with a very clear intent. And a lot of times, the intent is not there with women. The decision is not there with the women. And my first response on empowerment, why the decision-making is so important. The decision, if it's yours, you will own up to it, and then you will go the extra mile if you need to. But also when you're getting into a marriage, it's an equal relationship, supposed to be. have those conversations. This is what I counsel girls all the time. Have the conversations before getting married, rather than regretting it 5 months later, leaving the job, coming back and asking for the job back because that did not work. Have adult conversations and learn to have those conversations beforehand with your family, with maybe your in-laws and your spouse. And if you see red flags, don't get into it. There will be other.
Of course, they
people
can
who
cook.
would love you.
It's not
eventually.
So why are men not taking over the responsibility of cooking and sharing that with women?
So, if you allow me, let me bring in Sarwat here. We heard that support is important. I also had the chance of talking to young girls, and they said that in the private sector especially, because women's biological role, and like she said, this is the time that when they're making their career, that's a very crucial time, career-wise. They said, if we demand, some facilities like daycare center or something to address the mobility issues and all, then there is an unsaid ban on hiring women of that age. Is that true?
I wouldn't think so. I think it's literally about, are you making the effort? Is there a commitment? Are you willing to come back and also give in your best? So if I talk about Jazz, we have very good policies on that. We offer the maternity leave of 6 months. And after that as well, we have a phase back program where we, let people adjust, give them flexibility. Flexibility has been the core, I think. And while COVID did it more recently, Jazz has been doing it for a number of years. So flexibility, offering that flexibility, offering daycare facilities, supporting basically, and also creating that awareness where you're able to offer support to people who are coming back. Because, for example, when I came back, this is 12 years ago when I had my 4th child, when I came back, one of the comments that I got was, oh, we were not expecting you back. But then, of course, I had a personal commitment as well. You need to have that self-motivation, and then you get adjusted. I think this is how I look at it.
Tell me, did Jazz ever lose business or profits because he has this kind of policies for women?
If anything, I think it adds to it. And it adds to the brand as well.
That's another, Jeroen, I'll come to you. That if you invest in women, you actually make profit sooner than you think. Is that true, or it's just, a counter narrative being created to encourage women to come in?
No, I mean, as I explained before, it's a sound economic investment. So women empowerment is really at the heart of what we do. I would also like to say it's not just about women empowerment, and it goes back to your first question about roles. It's also about gender equality. So indeed, I like the example of the cook. I recall that we did a nice project some years ago where we established father clubs. Because you mentioned the issue of care, and you somehow said this is a women's role. But that's also breaking a little bit the pattern. Many fathers like to spend time with their children. Maybe the traditional setup doesn't allow them to give in to this craving. But why is it that it's only a woman that has to take care? So we created father clubs, so really fathers could exchange about the problems they have and also the joys they have of spending time with their kids and how to really make best of this quality time. So gender equality goes far beyond women empowerment, and I think we really have to put that in the heart of what we do across the globe.
Add one thing to what Sarwat was earlier saying. When you look at barriers and unsaid things in organizations which have a smaller scale in terms of population of employees, like smaller means 1,000 to 3,000, 4,000 employee base. Over there, you would have it less than organizations which have a bigger scale, because bigger scale organizations have to be everywhere, and their population sizes would be more than 10,000. So when you are working with a population size of more than 10,000, the complexity becomes much, much more nuanced also. And at times there are challenges to flexibility. You may provide the policies, but the policy may not be utilized in the same way by the rural or by the urban population of that particular organization. So a lot of things impact actually how you get the resources in, especially the underrepresented groups, and how you create that balance in terms of percentages when we look at percentages. But percentage is a very basic way of looking at gender equality in any organization.
Let's just move into the theme of this year's International Women's Day. We've been talking around it. It's Invest in Women, Accelerate Progress. You seem to all agree that if we invest in women, we will accelerate progress at the country level. But there is a new term, gender financing. What does that mean? Just so people understand it better, whoever wants to take it up.
So from the banking perspective, we are looking at gender financing in terms of how, the number one thing is, of course, what kind of access to finance is available. And that in itself is a very complicated question, because access to finance requires now in terms of how you create an equal playing field, and for that you require technology. And technology is a great equalizer as well. However, access to technology then comes before access to finance for women. So a segregated financing component in terms of products and services for women that any industry actually comes up with, service industries, is what we are talking about. And then that means that, you know, all the lending component, the products that are specific to women, are they reaching the urban only or the rural as well? So there's a great divide here again. The population is spread, and you have a lot more in urban, in rural than in urban. Access to technology is not there. We don't have the data on access to technology for women. Segregated sex data is still not available with our organizations, which becomes a real problem, because if you cannot measure the problem, you cannot really fix it. Then on top of that, you go to access to finance, and access to finance also requires financial literacy. So the NFLP program, which has been run by the State Bank and all the banks, has been doing a great job, yet this is not enough. So all these things are actually tied up, and when we do not even look at the data, we actually don't know the extent to which what we are. So every organization may be doing a little bit and thinking, oh, we've done a great job. Some of the regulators, for example, State Bank does look at it. At least there is that. The regulator role becomes extremely important. The government role becomes extremely important, because through the regulators like SCCP, State Bank, if there are standards specified, if there are targets specified for rural, for urban, and if from technology perspective, if the access is ensured, which it isn't right now, all these things will come into play afterwards. So when we talk about gender financing, yes, in pockets we can do it, but the impact of it is there, yet it cannot be enough, and you can't have the tipping balance until unless you actually work as a cohesive, unified force with the government, with the other agencies which work on these areas.
Okay, so I'll move on from there to women supporting women. And before I ask the gentleman, I'll ask you, Sarwat, what has been your experience? Women, do they support each other in the work environment, or it was the other way around?
Yes, fortunately for me, I think it's been very positive. I think once we understand that, you know, you don't have to get insecure and you do your work, I think you encourage each other and you cheer for each other. I think it's easier. And especially, I think, when we talk about professional women, at any level, if you see the intention, the ambition, the commitment, I think it makes it easier for everybody.
I'll just add here, I think the women networks help each other. because men would help men. That network works very well. But when women get into the men network, it's not necessary that you would get any kind of support from them, because you are a competitor in so many other ways. So it becomes a challenge. Women, interestingly, throughout my career, I've seen women networks come up with absolute positive support, which is substantive and which helps your career. So that has been my experience.
Do you agree, Jeroen?
Listen, I would like to come.
Look bad.
No, but I would like to come back to this issue of gender finance. I was
Right.
last week. I was in Sindh. We visited some of the projects that we are having. One of them is deep in the rural countryside of Sindh, villages that are really poor, have been affected by the floods, and we worked together with the government of Sindh to establish what we call rural growth centers. So they invest in some of the basic infrastructure, and we from our side, we invest in strengthening possibilities for entrepreneurs to set up businesses with some small matching grants. And we try to identify in these rural areas potential entrepreneurs. And I was joining a session where these SMEs were coming together and they got trained how to develop a business plan. Now, basically, I looked around me and I saw pretty much only men. So even though our scheme was set up to support women, because we have matching grants where if you are a man entrepreneur, 50% of the grant we provide, let's say, a grant, and 50% should be matched by a man entrepreneur. For women entrepreneur, we only ask that 30% come. Despite this, we had almost no women in the hall, and then I saw finally a few women. I started talking with them. Actually, she's the wife of, and we have to actually be careful that these schemes that we set up with a certain incentive in mind are not abused just to, let's say, to put a woman on the shield without this changing. But it also shows, indeed, as you rightly said, it's not only about making available certain schemes, it goes much, much deeper. And that's why we need, I think, to work concertedly with government, with civil society, with private sector. It's not something we do in one day, but we have to really keep focus on it and have this long-term perspective. And I need strong leaders to show that things can actually work. Because we did have one woman, a real woman, one out of too few, who really had a bright idea about a business. And I'm sure actually of all these people, she will be very successful, and hopefully she can demonstrate to others in this remote part of Sindh that actually you can make a difference.
Brilliant.
Yes. Thank you very much. We touch on a couple of things. The gender financing is one. But let me start by supporting the view that my colleague had. Women themselves are not homogeneous. So those that are in the urban areas, those that are in the corporate world, for instance, those that are elites in governance, are totally different from those that you will find in the rural areas. So we have to acknowledge that. I mean, the same applies for men, for boys and girls, as the case may be. So gender financing, looking at it more generically, is not only targeted at women. It's really targeted about men, women, boys, and girls. But it goes beyond just looking at things from the surface. It's to understand what are the needs and the aspirations of women versus men, and what are the needs and aspirations of girls versus boys. And whether the investment is from the point of government, we plan and deliver those investments so that people, whether they are women, they are men, they are boys and girls, are able to realize those aspirations and reach their fullest potential in whatever they are doing. So from the government side, for instance, gender responsive planning and budgeting is the tool. if you are investing in markets, are you investing in markets that are women-friendly? If you are establishing health centers in rural areas, how far away are they located from the critical mass of rural women? And what is the transport infrastructure for pregnant women to get to those places? I think those are important things. That is really what gender financing is. You are looking at it. If you are looking at entrepreneurship, what kind of investment are you supporting? Are you supporting wholesalers, where as a result of traditional disadvantages that women face, they are not there, or there are very few there? Or do you want to look at women in basic production areas and therefore target them, that you should be doing A, B, C, and then we support you? Those value chains, those activities that are dominated by the vulnerable are the activities that can bring inclusivity, and that brings gender financing. We have gone beyond that to say that from the government point of view, there have been a lot of biasness. Like you rightly said, even though that's a development, is supported by development partners, and is still looking a little, skewed to men, with government it's even worse, because the planners are all men. And so they put money into the chain. If you talk about public procurement, for instance, all the contracts will go to the men, because they are the ones that have been there. And yet you have very competent female entrepreneurs that can win those contracts and build on what they have been doing. The experience from where I have worked is that we're actually promoting a program on affirmative procurement. And the results are showing that women entrepreneurs are even more reliable in terms of fulfilling their contracts, government contracts. They don't leave projects unended. Many times the male contracts, they move between governments. They don't end it in this government, and another government comes and give contract to another set of people. Women are more thorough. So that is what the government can do.
So, quick round. I want monosyllable answers, one word answers from all of you. If things were ideal and you had the power to change one thing to make sure that women in this country can enter the workforce and leave their mark there, what will be that one thing?
Education.
Family planning.
I would go with education.
Okay. That's the one positive. What is the one negative that you would like to remove if you had the power in this society? You guys have worked here. He's new, but I'm sure he knows, because there's similar societies all over the world. What is the one thing that needs to go immediately?
Patriarchy.
Oh, wow. Small desire. Right.
This traditional role model.
Stereotypical roles. Right.
Financial dependence.
Financial, so they have to be economically dependent.
Setting barriers on what women can be.
Right. So now I will just hand over the mic to each and every one of you for your final thoughts, any inspirations. Just be very brief, starting with Alia.
Briefly, I think for women, especially in Pakistan, every day you need to fight it out and keep fighting.
Beautiful. It's for me, I would say, working on gender equality, women empowerment, it's a marathon, not a sprint. There will be upsets. During COVID, for instance, we saw suddenly domestic violence going up massively, but we should stick the course.
For me, it would be diversity is a fact and inclusion is an act. So let's take actions to make it inclusive.
Yeah. For me, before coming here, I actually felt that Pakistan was too conservative at all levels. I think I am taking that away, to some extent. But yes, there is, no society is totally conservative, and there is an opportunity to create change. So even here, gender equality is a difficult terrain, but there are opportunities for us to make that change, and we should continue to walk that road.
Pakistani women are going to still struggle for a bit, but things are changing. We have seen the changes with our own eyes, witnessed the changes from my childhood, when there were only a select number of women who had opted to leave their homes go into the workforce. Now, due to maybe it is the economic pressures or whatever the reason, it's not an option. If it's not an option, then why are we not letting our girls fully realize their potentials? If they have the ability to become the Prime Minister, we have the responsibility to make sure they do. And if they have the ability to do whatever they want to, we have the responsibility to let them dream. So on that thought, Allah Hafiz.